Pokemon Pocket Space Time Smackdown expansion is in full swing, and we've got over 3,600 deck lists to look at for some results this week on how our brand new metagame is shaking up. Let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? Our starting metagame distribution was incredibly diverse, with nothing hitting even 10% play rate. We had a handful that were above 5%, though. They were Darkrai Magnezone, Palkia Vaporeon, Exeggutor variations with both Yanmega or Celebi as their secondary attacker, Charizard Moltres, and Darkrai Weavile. We also had a handful of archetypes in the 2 to 5% range, which were Gyarados Greninja, Dialga Yanmega, Dialga Melmetal, and Mewtwo. From our starting 3,600 deck list sample, we had over 400 decks that had a 70% win rate or better in our events. Comparing our starting distribution to this top performing distribution, some trends start to occur. In particular, the Darkrai Magnezone deck is definitely our breakout week 1 deck, increasing its starting 8% share to over 23% of the top performing deck list this week. Our other two standout performers this week are the Palkia Vaporeon variations that converted their 8% starting distribution to over 12% of our top performers, as well as the Dialga Yanmega builds that took their meager 3% starting share and almost doubled it to 5% of our top performers. A number of our archetypes from before the Space-Time Smackdown release had relatively flat performances this week, so neither good nor bad, maintaining the same percentage in our top performers as they did among the starting distributions. These were Exeggutor Celebi variations, Charizard Moltres, and Gyarados Greninja. So while these deck lists don't look like they're likely to be dominating the format moving forward, they also look like they're going to remain competitive options for people that enjoy playing them. One archetype, however, that has been thoroughly smacked down by Space-Time is definitely the Mewtwo deck. Previous format powerhouse, now both a low play rate and even lower performance rate, having the worst performance delta of any of our popular decks this week. This makes a lot of sense. Not only are there more decks with higher HP things, thanks to Giant Cape being in the metagame, but Darkrai variations were both incredibly popular and performing very well this week, being a natural predator to the Psychic deck weak to Dark typing. Let's kick off looking at particular deck lists with the star of the weekend, the Darkrai Magnezone deck. If you're not familiar with this, it plays only dark energy in its energy zone, so that way it can trigger Darkrai every single turn if necessary, and Magneton does the lifting of providing lightning energy for your eventual finisher, Magnezone. You activate Magneton's ability the turn you evolve it to the stage 1, then you can activate it a second turn before evolving it to stage 2 on the follow-up, giving you 2 lightning energy so you can blast Magnezone off twice. Typically 2 hits for 110 are going to be enough to allow you to close out most of your games. The power in this deck list comes from its flexibility, though. While you can get blasting with a Magnezone right away, you can also just turtle up behind a Drudagon's Rough Skin ability while poking for 20 damage every single turn while you build up Darkrai in the back. This deck's ability to lead with multiple 1 knockout point Pokemon that have hefty HP pools between Drudagon and Magnezone make it so your opponent has a lot to chew through while also having to survive your big blast for 100 plus damage every single turn. While all the variations of this deck are playing the full Magnezone line into Darkrai EX, the frontline Pokemon do have some variation in them. A majority are playing 2 copies of Drudagon, but some are playing a singleton Kangaskhan in addition to this, or as a split 1 and 1. Kangaskhan seems to give you a little bit of an edge in the mirror match, since Darkrai plus Kangaskhan can run down an opposing Drudagon, giving you an edge. As far as utility cards go, there's still a lot of experimentation, but at least one copy copy of Cyrus and Giant Cape seem to be the most commonly included cards on top of the staples Pokeball and Research. While the Darkrai Weavile's performance is a little bit less impressive than the absolute domination the Magneton build has, it's by no means a bad deck, and if you enjoy playing something with a far more aggressive slant, this is an excellent choice. The most powerful draws in this deck involve your copies of Dawn. Essentially what you're looking to do is you'll have your lead attacker, either a Weavile or a Farfetch'd, and a Darkrai on the bench. You'll attach your first energy to the Darkrai. You'll use Dawn to move it up to your 1 energy starting attacker and get both your 20 and your starting damage for the turn. When you have first evolution advantage, this means you can put this energy out and deal 20, evolve into Weavile, and crack for 70 right away, clearing out things for 90 points of damage with your first attack of the game. While most of the successful Weavile variations are playing Farfetch'd as their third attacking line, there are a handful doing things like playing Weezing as well. There was a lot of Palkia Manaphy variations played in tournaments this weekend, but builds featuring Mythical Island Vaporeon were both the most popular and successful among them. I would wager part of the reason for this is the fact that Mythical Island Vaporeon is a single knockout point Pokemon, meaning after your opponent clears a Manaphy that's accelerating your backline, you can move into it and give it up as a second single knockout point before finishing on Palkia. This is a very different dynamic than if you're playing something like a Starmie or an Articuno alongside Palkia, which would mean once your Manaphy gets cleared, they only need to knock out a single EX Pokemon to win the game against you. Noteworthy inclusion in this particular successful list that I'm highlighting in the video today is the 2 copies of Giant Cape. I would wager this is instrumental to Manaphy's success inside of this format, where things like Skarmory, Farfetch'd, and Darkrai applying pressure right away can clear out 50 HP very quickly, but 70 typically lives an additional turn to generate 2 more energy for you. Dialga Yanmega is the most successful among the Dialga lists this weekend, and I would wager Yanmega's grass typing is in part responsible for that. Darkrai being incredibly popular is 140 HP weak to grass that Yanmega clears in a single hit, while other metal tools like Melmetal come up short and need 2 turns to clear them out. Mew also still provides fantastic coverage into random things like Charizard or even a Mewtwo if you run into it, letting you clean them out in one go. It's worth noting that some variations of Dialga Yanmega are playing copies of Skarmory, but the more successful ones were not. I would wager this is a similar dynamic to what I was talking about the Manaphy decks earlier, where if you play Skarmory along with all other EX Pokemon, your opponent can clear that 80 HP lead, and then they only need to knock out 1 EX, whereas if you build the deck like I'm showing here on the screen, they need to clear through 2 higher HP EX Pokemon, making it more difficult for them to win the game. As far as utility cards go, there is a ton of variation, whether you're playing 2 Capes or 2 Helmets or more Cyrus and less Sabrina, and I would wager figuring out those details to be optimized is going to take some time. Dialga Melmetal had a pretty rough weekend overall, and looking at its matchup tables inside of the tournament data, it's easy to see why. The variations of this archetype had bad matchups into basically every popular deck in today's roundup. They were losing more than they were winning against Darkrai decks, Palkia decks, Exeggutor decks, and Charizard decks. Obviously, it's still very early on in the format, and maybe we can optimize around the Melmetal build some more, but I don't have a good idea from a theory perspective offhand what exactly we could do to improve some number of those seemingly hard matchups. Our Exeggutor EX variations were split almost exactly down the center when it comes to what their follow-up attacker was behind the egg tree. A number of people are playing the new Yanmega from our latest expansion that has really good breakpoints into Darkrai, Weavile, and things like Weezing, since it's cracking for 120 on a grass-type Pokemon, but there are also plenty of people playing Celebi from last season. The Celebi variations from last season had some interesting variations, though, like the one you see on the screen now that has just 2 basic Pokemon in it. By leveraging a low basic count alongside 2 copies of Pokemon Communication, you can almost guarantee your games are going to have an Exeggutor online ASAP, which makes your deck a good bit more consistent, I would wager. There isn't a data-driven conclusion from the samples that we have this weekend that I can see which of these 2 ways to play the Exeggutor is superior, although it's worth noting that superior is largely nowhere to be found as far as the Pokemon Pocket card goes now. We kick off looking at decks from previous seasons with Charizard. The notable inclusions from our new expansion are definitely Pokemon Communication as well as Dawn in this deck. Pokemon Communication helps you both assemble your Charizard more consistently in the mid to late game and also can help you have Moltres more consistently on the first turn. Dawn has a lot of solid utility, but largely allows you to be aggressive with Moltres. You use your Moltres to accelerate energy on the first turn, and then you Dawn that energy up to it on the second turn, allowing you to start attacking for 70 right away, which can be really important against decks with things like Exeggutor or Manaphy. One thing I will note is that a majority of the Charizard list this weekend were only playing 4 basic Pokemon, just the Moltres and Charizard lines like we see here in the sample list. I'll be curious to see if this remains optimal as the metagame matures. It feels like a song and dance we go through every season in Pokemon Pocket when new card packs release, as people forget the deck building heuristics that we'd already learned and they cut back on basics to fit new cards in, and then as the decks develop and the formats get optimized more, that third Pokemon line always seems to work itself back in because diversifying your game plan tends to let you win more in Pocket. The Gyarados Greninja deck doesn't really have any variation from the previous season, with Cyrus as a lone supporter working its way into the utility cards that's quite strong with Greninja's Water Shuriken ability. This doesn't surprise me a whole heck of a lot. This list is really tight since you need 12 slots for your Pokemon. You want Research and Pokeball, and then Misty is a must include as well typically. Mewtwo decks by and large got chewed up and spit out this weekend for a variety of reasons, the primary of which is the fact that Darkrai decks are type advantage into them, letting them aggressively run down your psychic cards, but it passed that. The inclusion of Giant Cape in this format means that the Mewtwo side drive isn't clearing many things that it previously was before. This deck really struggles when it can't get its 150 damage cannon online and clear something every single turn. As far as the few successful Mewtwo variations go, they were playing things like Pokemon Communication, Cyrus, and copies of Giant Cape themselves from our latest expansion.
Who's that Pokemon?
Players should note that Pikachu EX is notably absent from this metagame report. Its overall metagame share wasn't large enough to make it onto the starting game pie chart at the beginning, and looking at the smaller sample results, there were a mix of people playing both mostly the stock builds from last season with some small trainer upgrades, as well as folks trying to shove Pakarisu inside of that core. None of them were really finding any meaningful amounts of success, and I'll be interested to see if that optimizes more in the future to come back into the metagame. So, where do we go from here? Is Darkrai Magnezone just going to take over the metagame and be unstoppable? Well, one thing I thought that would be interesting to reference back to is if you recall when Mythical Island released, Gyarados Greninja had a breakout weekend. To throw that chart back up here on the screen for a quick moment, you'll see that Gyarados Greninja's performance delta here was almost exactly the same as what Darkrai Magnezone had this weekend. Which is to say that while Darkrai Magnezone is almost assuredly going to be a metagame threat that's here to stay, I wouldn't be surprised if while it equalizes at a higher metagame share than it had in this first round of tournaments, there aren't tools in this metagame that can rise up and give you a solid matchup into it. Personally, if I was looking to brew going forward, I think I would be considering looking at different ways to play Yanmega. It is a grass attacker that clears Darkrai in one shot while being colorless energy to attack, so you can splash it inside of a lot of different shells that you can work to optimize. I also think Infernape is an interesting card to consider because it's 140 damage and only clears Darkrai and Weavile, but it also clears Magnezone in a single shot as well. I would love to hear what deck lists you've been having success with in the comments down below. And if you're looking for some more off-meta things, be sure to stop by again for tomorrow morning's video, where I'm going to be highlighting the most interesting brand new decks that had singular results in pocket tournaments this past weekend, to see if we could pick out some future gems that might be attacking the metagame in a really efficient way. If you made it this far into my ramblings, I'd appreciate it if you smash that like button. If you happen to be new here, consider subscribing to the channel. I do a data-driven metagame report roundup like this every single week. I cover Pokemon Pocket here 7 days a week, always working on off-meta things, looking to attack the metagame in new ways. If that sounds like your cup of tea, you should come back again sometime. I hope your next pack is an excellent one. Enjoy the rest of your day.